Hello, good afternoon, everyone, all attendees. I hope you can hear me well. Please let me know if you can hear me. You can send me a chat, tell me if you can hear me well. We will start our webinar now, as it's already 3 p.m. Sharp. So I would like to welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Cubin and ENRICH in Brazil webinar. My name is Marta Octavia. I'm from the Cubin team from SPI Portugal, and I will be moderating the event for today. Let me share my presentation. Okay. Yes, thank you. This webinar is part of virtual training courses and one of the main tools from Cubin. It is a platform that is designed to help European SMEs with business and innovations in emerging markets. Cubin was set up by a consortium of experts in the fields of cultural differences with the involvement of SME support and innovation agencies. These project partners of Cubin are hosted in sites and SPI. Cubin is fully financed by the European Commission. Before we start, there are some housekeeping rules that I would like to inform everyone. So first of all, this webinar is recorded, and then the questions and discussions are welcome after the presentations of our speakers today, and you can send us your questions through the chat box. And during the discussion session, if there is any question that is unclear, as an organizer, we will unmute you or the person who asked the question to explain about the questions. And after the webinar finishes, you will receive a short survey for this webinar. We appreciate for your feedback to our survey, and also the presentations and recording of today's webinar will be sent to the participants, as well as will be made available in the Cubin website. Okay, I would like to introduce you with Cubin. So Cubin stands for Cultural Understanding for Business Expansion and Innovation. The aim of Cubin platform is to give you the tools you need to prepare yourself and your business for operating in an unfamiliar business environment. The platform focuses on selection of emerging economies, which have been defined as within the scope of the project, including Latin America, the region that we will discuss in today's webinar. So in Cubin platform, you can find various services that we have, includes self-assessment tools for everyone to test your knowledge in emerging markets, an online library to help you learn more about the culture and innovations or custom of the target country, and also webinar like what we have today. And also you can reach us to ask any questions you have in emerging markets. So please don't forget to visit our website, follow us on the social media, as well as subscribe to our mailing list. Okay, now I would like to call my colleague Thais Soares to inform us a little bit about ENRICH in Brazil, as today's webinar is a collaboration between Cubin and ENRICH in Brazil. Thais, I would like to give the floor for you.
Thank you, Marta. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Thais Soares. I'm a consultant at SPI, and I will just briefly introduce you to our project, Enriching Brazil. So Enriching Brazil stands for the European Network of Research and Innovation Centers and Hubs. It's a project that receives funding from the European Commission under the Horizon 2020 program. And the main aim of Enriching Brazil is to establish an innovation center in Brazil, which we already have done. We have an innovation center based in São Paulo, and we also have a representation in Brussels. And the goal of Enriching Brazil is to bridge Brazil and Europe. And we want to be a state-of-art innovation policy, research, and network. We want to provide this connection between Brazil and Europe. And we also provide some services that you can check on our website. We have already launched some funding guidelines for Brazil and Europe and other services that you can check. And that's it, Martha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thais, for the brief introduction of ENRICH in Brazil. We are very glad from Cubin to be able to collaborate together with ENRICH in Brazil in today's webinar. So please, everyone, also visit their website to know more about the project activities. So now, without further ado, I would like to welcome everyone to the main session of today's webinar, which is the webinar in innovation and digital transformation in the agribusiness sector and cultural insights on doing business in Latin America. As we know that the innovation and digital transformation of the agribusiness sector in Latin America is undoubtedly evolved rapidly throughout recent years. The characteristic of the business environment, as well as the cultural aspects in different countries of this region, also very crucial for us in obtaining a thorough understanding of this sector. With these two understanding in mind, we are very delightful today that we have both of our speakers that will be presenting today. So first we have Mr. Daniel Lange, Innovation Manager at Robert Bosch. Mr. Daniel is passionate about innovation and entrepreneurship. Since 2016, he led innovation at Bosch Curitiba in Brazil as a key strategic initiative promoting a strong cultural transformation approach and developing new business for the commercial vehicle market in Latin America. During the last years, Daniel and his team lived an intense journey which included new cooperation approach and hundreds of user interviews to learn about the reality of agriculture in Latin America, finding relevant pains to be addressed through innovations. Our second speaker today is Mr. Christian Billy, Associate Partner of Hofstad's Insight. Christian is certified integral coach and holds a BA in social communications. He specialized in understanding patterns of human motivation, decoding cultural narrative, and examining how this might affect individuals, organizations, brands, and society at large. Having lived in 4 countries, Mexico, Brazil, Switzerland, and the US, and traveled extensively across 4 continents, he applies his diverse background and life experience to help people expand their capacity for renewal and growth in our increasingly complex and dynamic world. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, first we will listen to Mr. Christian's presentation about the cultural aspects of doing business in Latin America, which will be followed by the agribusiness innovation in Latin America from Mr. Daniel Lange. And after that, we will have time for a discussion. Please, during the presentation, if you have any question, please send to us your question in the chat box. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Christian, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martha, for the wonderful introduction. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My challenge for the next 15 minutes or so is to provide you with a brief overview of not 1, but 5 countries. So I will try my best to offer you some useful insights as well as a flavor of the region's culture. Marta, something is not working here.
Okay, I will show you.
My screen is blocked.
Okay, let me open from my side.
So sorry, I don't know what happened.
That's okay. I hope everyone can see now.
Yeah, but I cannot forward my slides.
Yes, I hope everyone see the slide now. Yeah, okay.
Yes, but I cannot advance the slides for some reason.
Yes. I think now everyone saw the new slide already. Christian, you can go on.
So should I just continue? Let me try something, okay? Give me just a second.
Christian, now the screen is already showing your slide, so I think you can continue. It's from our slide.
Okay, so you're in control now?
Yes, we are in the second slide already.
Okay, can you see my slide now?
No, now I'm taking over your slide, Christian, so everyone is seeing the second slide.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so when people think of Latin America, they will think of the jaguar, the toucan, or the llama, but not the guinea pig. So whatever ideas you already have about the region, I invite you to look closer. Latin America has enormous challenges, as I'm sure you know, but one thing to keep in mind is that it has made huge contributions to the world. It is extremely rich in creativity and innovation. So this little guinea pig here is actually from Peru. I don't know if you knew that, but it's the name can be a little misleading. But it's a very interesting story of how it came to be such a beloved pet around the world. So we can go to the next slide, Marta.
Yes.
So I'd like to start with a quick summary of how Latin American culture originated. The entire region's history was shaped by several waves of migration and colonization over an extended period of time. And it represents the confluence of three main population groups: indigenous, European, and African. Unlike North America, it was colonized mostly by Spain and Portugal instead of Great Britain. This produced a very distinct cultural legacy from the very start. And then you had the Aztecs, the Mayas, Incas, whose influence is still very noticeable in countries like Mexico, Guatemala, and Peru. Climate and topography also played a big role. Some of our favorite staple foods around the globe today, like corn, cacao, and quinoa, all of them came from Latin America. Chile and Peru are still the world's largest exporters of copper, for example. Another important factor in the cultural makeup of the region is that it was responsible for 80 to 85% of the transatlantic slave trade. Brazil alone imported 10 times as many slaves as the United States. So not surprisingly, almost 50% of the country's population today is of African descent. This, of course, has had enormous ramifications in society. The term mestizo originated in Mexico to denote people of mixed European and indigenous descent. In Brazil, you will hear the term mulatto, referring to the cross between black and white ancestry. In Chile, on the other hand, you will hardly find any black people at all. Next slide, please. So Latin American culture operates under a value system that we at HOF today like to call a pyramid model. There is an understanding that few people are at the top, some are in the middle, and many are at the bottom. And it is generally accepted that this is how things work. So what are some of the implications of this? The first one is that society tends to have a collectivistic orientation. Surely, people expect to have certain freedoms, but it is more important to preserve the harmony and not disturb the social order. To some, it may be even the cosmic or the divine order. Feeling useful to others and taking responsibility for fellow members of the group or community takes precedence over seeking notoriety for oneself. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't have individual leaders, but it means that the leader is at the top, and it is the role of everyone else to follow the directions coming from the top. Questioning authority does happen. We've seen plenty of street protests in Mexico, Brazil, and Chile, but protesting will normally happen in the safety of a group, and the bigger the group, the better. Arguably, the most important thing for Latin Americans is to feel that they belong. Therefore, what you do tends to matter less than who you do it with. So this is really important, like who you're collaborating, who you're working with is really important. Relationships at work tend to operate under the same framework, which is why showing loyalty to your boss becomes very important. In general, employees will focus on holding on to their position instead of climbing up the ladder, because the fear of stumbling down is stronger than the desire to show initiative. Now, that said, attaining status is important, and it is perfectly okay to seek more power and prestige. This is particularly the case in Mexico and Colombia, where personal success is highly valued. On the other hand, being too direct or confrontational or even aggressive may be perceived as a threat to the order and stability of the pyramid. So one has to learn how to dance. Next slide. So also, how you communicate makes all the difference. The ability to cooperate and be diplomatic will open many doors for you. So be flexible and be ready to make concessions. Importantly, Latin America in general tends to be characterized by a high context communication. So part of what this means is that there are a lot of unspoken rules, implicit assumptions, and hidden meanings. When someone says yes, it could mean no. And no is a word that tends to be avoided. Tomorrow may mean tomorrow or someday in the near future. So my best advice is this: don't expect everything to make perfect sense, because it won't. And my tip for today is learn to use diminutives. And this applies to both Spanish and Portuguese. It is a common way that people use to soften the tone and to be friendly. I'm sure you've heard, even with names, with people's names, it's very common to use diminutives like Ronaldinho, Lupita in Mexico is very common. So this is something that if you can just learn a few words using diminutives, people will appreciate that. So next slide, Marta. We can actually skip, let's see, we can skip this one. We can skip this one too. Okay, so something that might jump at you immediately when you see Brazil on a map is just how big it is compared to all of its neighboring countries. While the 5 countries we're discussing today represent about 75% of the region's GDP, Brazil alone represents about 30% of the total. This brings me to an important point: Brazilians' sense of uniqueness, not only because of geographic, demographic, and economic dominance, but also for speaking a different language than everyone else. So I remember when I worked for multinational companies and I needed to implement marketing campaigns throughout the region, the one thing I would always hear from my colleagues in Brazil and my compatriots was that doesn't work here because we are different. But perhaps one of the things that truly makes Brazilians stand out is their sense of hope and optimism, as often expressed in popular refrains such as Brazil is the country of the future, or God is Brazilian, or the famous jeitinho brasileiro. In other words, we can figure it out on our own. In contrast, you have Chile, which takes a much more humble and modest approach. Chile's population is smaller and its soil is more arid. However, it has managed to build a higher standard of living for its people. For decades, it was recognized as the most stable country in the region, only to show some cracks in its system recently. One could proudly say that if Brazilians are the optimists of South America, Chileans are the most dependable, yet equally resourceful. So if Brazil is to be celebrated for its uniqueness and Chile for its steadiness, how about the other three? So let's look at 4 cultural dimensions, and perhaps you can come up with your own observations afterwards. Next slide, Marta. So as you might expect, any culture that fits the description of a pyramid model will tend to score high on power distance. And this is true for the 5 countries in question, with Mexico being the most hierarchical, as you can see on the graph. And basically this means that Mexico is the one where people tend to be more accepting of the fact that there are differences in or even big gaps between the powerful and the less powerful. So something you need to make sure is to know who the decision makers are. By all means, be inclusive and invite participation, but always involve the decision maker from the start, because otherwise you could be wasting a lot of people's time. The concentration of power and wealth is also evident in the demographic, political, and economic structure of most countries in Latin America. In Brazil, for instance, the state of São Paulo alone drives more than 25% of the country's economic output. The other thing is that family ties and personal networks tend to have a lot of influence behind the scenes in business dealings. This is particularly so in Mexico and Colombia. Personal connections are often the most valuable asset one can have for creating opportunities. In some cases, they can secure a job or a contract more effectively than professional credentials and educational achievement. So that's another really important thing to keep in mind. So another key thing to highlight here is the relationship between the powerful and the powerless, as I already mentioned. You will be able to observe this very clearly in almost every interaction in every country, whether it's the customer and the sales clerk in the store, the rancher and the cowboy, the executive and the manager, or the homeowner and the domestic help. In Latin America, there tends to be less direct confrontation between people because of their skin color or ethnicity, like we see in the US, for example. So everyone will happily share the beach, the bar, or the workplace, and the dance floor. Does this mean that racism doesn't exist? Certainly not. But what tends to play a bigger role is social stratification, as well as the degree to which the culture is more masculine than feminine. And we'll talk about it in a second. So this phenomenon is exceptionally well depicted in the film titled Roma. Strongly recommend it in case you haven't seen it yet. It will give you a very good sense for what I just exposed. Next slide, Martha. So when it comes to individual freedoms versus collectivism, all Latin American countries score consistently more collectivistic. You may be familiar with the folktale of the crabs in a bucket. And I remember, a few years ago, a Mexican colleague of mine once shared with me a version of this folktale, which told the story of a fisherman carrying two buckets, one with Canadian crabs and one with Mexican crabs. The one with Canadian crabs had a lid on it, and the one with Mexican crabs did not. So a curious bystander asked him why, and the fisherman explained, you see, when one Canadian crab tries to escape the bucket, all the other crabs will follow suit. But when one Mexican crab tries to escape, the other ones will pull it back down. Now, of course, keep in mind that this story has been retold millions of times and one can give it multiple meanings. But the most important thing to remember is that Latin Americans in general have a very groupish mentality. So it's all about the group and the cohesiveness of the group. Brazilians may be a little slightly less so. Remember, we talked about their sense of uniqueness. However, Brazilians too, they love extended families, they love physical touch, and they love to stand united behind a common cause, like their national football team. The root of all of this is just a strong sense of togetherness, and that you can only truly advance in life and in your career if you have the support of others. And one of the biggest questions always is, who can I trust? Who's got my back? When you interact with your counterparts in the region, you should make an extra effort to know a little bit about them, their family, their hobbies, their interests. So, for example, if you have scheduled a call with someone on their birthday and you actually wish them a happy birthday up front, you will make a great impression. It's small details like that that really help build the personal connection. Next slide, Marta. So we have two cultural dimensions to go. As far as the dimension of masculinity goes, countries behave more unevenly than in the previous two dimensions. So masculine cultures tend to be more results-driven and focus on material success and have gender roles more clearly defined. Feminine cultures tend to focus on social responsibility as well as overall balance and well-being. They tend to approach conflict differently as well. Chile, for instance, has a society that tends to favor modesty over assertiveness. So it is considered a more feminine culture. It recently had a two-term female president, for example. Brazil, on the other hand, really strives to find a balance between material success and quality of life. So you see it's right there in the middle on the graph. And also, it also includes the care for the environment. So perhaps the greatest symbol of this tension is its relationship with the Amazon rainforest. Now, this kind of conflict, on how to prioritize your needs and the needs of others is nothing new to Latin America because it has so much land and it is so rich in natural resources. So it's always trying to strike a delicate balance. But in terms of conflict, it's really interesting because conflict is practically what defines the identity of countries like Mexico, Colombia, and Venezuela. If you were Mexico, for example, and endured the historical double whammy of having a fearsome warrior culture like the Aztecs being decimated, and then later on in history, losing half of your territory to the United States, you would probably be extremely vigilant about others wanting to take advantage of you. So these kinds of historical events really shape the cultural psyche of the countries significantly. One thing that cannot be overstated is the importance of negotiation. The more your counterparts perceive the relationship to be a win-win, the more receptive and collaborative they will be. So on this dimension, Costa Rica is actually worth mentioning too, although it's not one of the key countries we're talking about, because for quite some time now, it has been the region's darling in terms of nature conservation and ecotourism. And the country has not had an army for more than 70 years. So this is a quite unique scenario. And it's, perhaps this has something to do with Costa Rica being consistently ranked among the happiest countries on earth. Maybe. So next slide, Marta, and the last one. So uncertainty avoidance is the dimension that expresses the degree to which people try to feel in control of their future, even if it cannot be controlled. So for instance, people tend to be less uptight and worry less in Brazil than they do in Chile. But they tend to be definitely a lot more relaxed in the Caribbean. So as you can see on the graph, Jamaica all the way down, they are much more flexible in terms of how they relate to the unknown and to the future. Throughout Latin America, you will see an infinite number of strategies through which people try to preserve and protect their turf and their way of life, from having excessive regulation and bureaucracy to practicing all sorts of religious beliefs and observing strict codes of conduct as well. Even the way you dress, the way, even what car you drive. Unfortunately, these artificial controls don't always produce good outcomes, and they tend to apply, only to the average citizen, but not to the ones in power. So that's a big source of the inequalities you see in the region. And this is one of the paradoxes of Latin America. You would imagine that an excess of rules would produce an orderly society, but order is more the exception than it is the norm. Samba schools performing during Carnival are a fascinating case study. Like my brother likes to say, when Brazilians find something they truly care about, they also find the discipline to carry through with it and not leave anything to chance. The final word I will say on this front is the importance of relationships. Strong relationships foster trust, and trust fosters a sense of safety. One of the biggest tragedies of Latin America today is that trust has been eroded on many fronts. By restoring trust, we can restore people's sense of safety, and they will feel more freedom to ideate and innovate. So with that, I will hand it over to Danielle, and I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christian, for the presentation or your session. Now I will give the control to Daniel so you can start your presentation. Wait a second, Daniel. Okay, now I believe you could already try to show your presentation. Yes, very well. Okay, Daniel, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Marta. Thank you, Christian. Hello, everybody. It is a great pleasure to be here with you and share some of our learnings working with innovation for agribusiness here in Latin America. So thank you, Cubin and ENRICH Brazil, for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Daniel. As Marta mentioned, I am really passionate about innovation and entrepreneurship. And for the last 4 years, I lived a very intense journey to promote cultural transformation in the Robert Bosch plant here in Brazil. I live in Curitiba. It is in the south of Brazil and the capital of the Paraná state, which is one of the most relevant areas in the region for agribusiness. I worked for Bosch for 15 years now. I started working in logistics and controlling, but in the last 4 years, I had a very nice opportunity to create together with some bright colleagues here in Brazil, a whole new approach for innovation. So as you may know, Bosch is a German multinational. It is a leader mainly in mobility solutions. It is a company which has more than 130 years old and is known by our innovation as part of the company DNA. But during the last years, we had to create a new approach for these innovations, which is not the conventional R&D approach. And I will share with you a little bit of this story and how we decided to change and what we learned doing business here in Latin America, focus on agriculture. So the picture you see in the screen is a picture from our plant here in Curitiba. Bosch is located here since the 70s. And when we started the plant here, it was fully focused on diesel injection systems. So we develop and produce parts for trucks and also agriculture machines and also construction machines. In the first decades, it was a very successful business because we had a very high market share in this diesel injection market, and we also grew a lot. So we got new investments from Europe to expand the plant, and also we expanded a lot the team. We had in 2007 more than 5,000 people working in our site here in Curitiba. But in 2008, things started to change very quick. We have the international economical crisis, and in the following years, we also lived some very tough economical situation here in Latin America. So we had to really fight to survive. So the first instinct was to focus on efficiency, improve process, reduce costs, and adapt to a new reality with lower production volumes. But after some time, we learned that if we only focus on efficiency, we would not guarantee our future here in the region. So we decided to create a new path and expand new business beyond the diesel injection solutions. And the way we chose to do it was a very new one, a new strategy with high levels of autonomy and cooperation among all the employees. So people from different areas with different backgrounds inside Bosch were invited to build a new approach and to develop new business beyond diesel. We also revised our strategy. In the first moment, we decided to go for mobility solutions, so beyond diesel. And then we learned that it would be a good focus to work with agribusiness. And then when we started this innovation initiative, our main focus was in agriculture. So why agribusiness? According to FAO, the world population will be very close to 10 billion people by 2050. And as people are also improving the quality of this, the food they are consuming, we will have to produce 70% more food. So it is a huge challenge for the whole humankind. And also, according to FAO, it is very clear that this increase on food production has to come from productivity. There is no way that we are going to achieve it expanding areas or using other kinds of solutions. It is really about innovation, about technology. And we also learned that it was a huge advantage to be here in the center of Latin America, in Brazil. And we really believe that Latin America is the right place to go when we are talking about innovation in agribusiness. And why is it? Why Latin America? I think it is very clear that we are very rich in natural resources, and here we can talk about solar energy, which is very a strong benefit for agriculture, and also the water resources available. We have a favorable condition, different from what we find in any other different region in the globe. So it is also a strong advantage. This has led to a very strong agriculture output, and also we are committed to improve our productivity during the last years. And today, Brazil and Latin America are leaders in a lot of different kinds of agriculture inputs. And it happened very fast during the last 2 decades. This new productivity increase, strong increase, also motivated by our innovation ecosystem. And this innovation ecosystem is growing, including different universities, big corporates as Bosch, and also the startups here in the region. Due to that, today, according to a recent study from FAO, we can say that Brazil is producing 1/4 of the global export agricultures and also fishery products. So it is clear that Latin America has a central role when we are talking about agribusiness and this challenge to produce more food for the growing population. And that's why we decided to go focusing on agriculture for our strategy to develop new business. And how we did it. So the first thing was really to promote cultural transformation inside the company. And this was done focusing on people. So we invited people to be part of this process. And it is interesting that many of the aspects Christian highlighted about Latin America culture, we observe in our experience here. So it was really important to create a clear purpose or a why behind the changes we were promoting, and we did it. So we explained it to everybody why we need to innovate, how is it relevant to secure our future here in the region. And then we also promoted a lot of cooperation inside the company. So we bring people together to work in these innovation projects, and also we took them to the field. So being focused on the user was a central pillar on our innovation strategy. So the main 3 changes we promoted since the beginning were be focus on the user. So every innovation has to start from a real customer pain, and you find this out of the office, going really to the field and talking to people to learn about their reality and the pains. The second one is to think about business models. So not only technology and product innovation, but really think about the whole business and innovating the business model. And the third one is the lean startup approach. So really be agile, test and interact with customers with a high frequency to adapt and create the best solutions for their pains. And based on this, we evolved to an intra-startup model. So now we have an acceleration program for new business ideas, where every associate can come up with ideas. And if this idea is prioritized according to our strategy, we will invest in the idea, and the associate will join people from other areas with some complementary profiles to create an internal startup. And this startup is going to the field, interacting with potential users and customers for their solution to test the main assumptions behind this innovation idea, to evolve developing this solution, or maybe stopping if they learn that it is not the right project to invest. So how does it work? We have created our own framework, which has some very critical points. And the first one is, as I said, from the beginning, really be user-centric. And during the whole year, we are looking for opportunities, and we are trying to generate relevant ideas based on these paints. So for example, what you see here in this picture is one of our events where we brought together cooperatives, OEM employees, associates from Bosch, and also students from different universities to work together, learning about real paints and generating ideas on how to solve it. Something very important to mention, in order to identify these opportunities, we go to the field using ethnography and user experience approaches, really open-minded to observe and learn from the users. So we had conducted hundreds of interviews, and we really go to the farm and live the daily life of a farmer, of a machine operator, in order to understand in a very good depth what are the pains where we can contribute with our technology and knowledge to create new solutions. After we identify these new opportunities and generate these ideas, as I mentioned, we have our acceleration methodology using Lean Startup, where we continuously test these ideas, also very user-centric, so interacting the whole time with potential users and customers, and testing and adapting our solution during this period. There are 3 phases. The first one we call preparation. It is a sprint of 2 weeks where this entry startup with 4 or 5 people go to the field to test the main assumptions. Then we go to the customer discovery phase. It is about 2 months, and here they really need to interact much more. We used to have a target of 100 interviews or interactions with users, customers, and experts. And if after this phase they can prove that it's worth to invest and develop this idea, we go to the 3rd phase called customer validation, where they need to build proof of concepts and evolve until they have a minimum viable product to acquire the first customers for their solution. So it's really bringing this startup approach to the big corporation, what we are doing here. And something also very important is to keep a strong engagement of our employees and also partners. So we have, as part of this program, engagement process where every employee can candidate to be part of this intra startup. And as I said, we are very concerned about creating a high purpose behind what we are doing, and keep people motivated to come and work in these innovation projects. And we also do it for partners. So it is very clear that for the kind of innovations we are developing here in Latin America, it is very important to cooperate, not only with users and customers, but also with other companies, startups, and universities. And that's what we are doing. So we are even creating mixed teams, including people from Bosch and external partners, to go through this acceleration process, as I mentioned. And one example of how we cooperate is a design sprint approach. So we called it Grand Prix. It is a 1 week sprint where we create these mixed teams, and they have the chance to be very close to the market and interact with users and experts during the 5 days. So for example, one of these Grand Prix we did here in the countryside in a city called Castro, where the associates, we took 30 associates from the factory here to the field, and they spent the whole week there with access to different farms and also to the cooperative, and the cooperative employees were also participating in this process. So they, in the first day, went to the field to identify relevant paints. Based on these paints, they generated a lot of ideas, prioritized some of them, prototype in the third day, and went back to the field to test these ideas and improve. So we are doing it with a lot of partners, a lot of engagement, and what is very important, really centered on the users to develop and adapt the solutions. So as I said, the main learnings we had during this intense journey of 4 years is you have to be focused on the user always. It sounds very very basic, but actually for technology companies as Bosch, it is not easy to do it because we are a company of engineers and we are passionate about technology. So normally it is easier to start from the technology. And what we are doing is inverting this process and really go into the field. So the picture you see, for example, it was a visit in a farm here in Brazil, in Goiás region. And we were there when they were harvesting soya. And we had the chance to observe what happens when a huge harvesting machine stopped working in the middle of the harvest. And then we learned a lot about this problem, and together with the farms, we generated some ideas on how we could use innovation to avoid this kind of situation. So how can you and your company become more user-centric? There are some key learnings, for example, to democratize the customer and user insights. The normal approach is, in most corporates, is to centralize the interaction with users and customers in sales. And what we do here is to democratize. So people from engineering, from logistics, from even HR, they can go to the field and they should learn about the customer interacting with them. The second topic is promote direct interaction among the teams, customers, and users. So the whole time they should interact, from the beginning to identify pain until the end when they are finishing the development of the solution. And by that, they are developing the solution together with the customer and not for the customer as we use it to do in the normal PD R&D process. Also learn fast and learn cheap. So really use agile methodology to test it fast. And for sure, in Latin America, innovation is about people. So it's important to make people understand the why behind what you are doing and keep them very engaged and motivated so you can get good results out of it. And for sure, cooperation is a must-have. So you are not doing it by your own. It is not coming from a solitary genius, but the innovation comes from cooperation, from interaction, and it is what have been working for us and also for many different companies here in the region, in Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay, where we have tested this innovative approach. Thank you. So I'm open for questions, and you can also connect with us in LinkedIn to learn more about what we are doing here.
Very well. Thank you very much, Daniel, for your presentation. It is very interesting indeed. I believe we learned a lot of insights from your presentation just now. And then now we open the floor for discussion. If anyone wants to ask anything, please send us your questions on the chat box. In the meantime, I already have some questions because remember for all the participants during their registration, we asked if there is any particular questions you would like to ask, so we can also address it now while waiting for the others questions. So first, maybe I would like to address for Daniel. This is questions from one of our registrations, Mr. Rory Donnelly from the European Association of Remote Sensing Companies in Belgium. The question is, how ready is the Latin America agricultural sector to take up precision farming? What are the key elements holding back uptake? This is the question that maybe you can address a little bit in this time. Otherwise, we are also still waiting for other questions. Please feel free to send us questions.
Okay.
Daniel?
Yeah. So I would say that the main challenge we have here to move forward in precise agriculture is the connectivity issue. So in most areas, we have huge farms here in Brazil, and in most areas, connectivity is not available. So we don't have 4G, 3G, or even 2G, nothing in some relevant regions here in Brazil. And currently, this has been the main focus from the government and also from companies. So it's also a characteristics here that we are not waiting for the government to solve it by their own. And there are many companies working together to speed up this process and make connectivity available all over the Brazilian territory. And I can mention one initiative is called Conectar Agro, and the most relevant OEMs and some telecoms, they are working together to speed up this process. Also, another very important topic is that we need to invest in innovation and technology development here in the country, and this is what Bosch is doing, for example. So what I just mentioned, it is one approach we are doing to really keep the investments in the region to develop these technologies, also cooperating with Germany, for example, in our case. But what we can contribute is really being closer to the customers and to the field here, and together with the experience we have in Europe, for sure we can make this precision agriculture happen here.
Okay, very well. Thanks, Daniel, for the answer on that. We have another question addressed to Christian. In your views, while you're explaining about the different cultural aspects from each of the countries in the Latin America, how about if do you think if there is we can or the businesses can we use the same negotiation skill or style throughout the different countries in the Latin America region, or would you advise to be a different style or negotiation style in each of the countries in Latin America? Thanks, Christian.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, you know, the key principle here is to always have an open, as much of an open dialogue as possible, right? I talked about the importance of having this sense of a win-win, right? So when you leave enough room for open conversation and collaboration, something that struck me that's really important in Daniel's presentation. He talks about this mindset of learning, this mindset of discovery, this mindset of user-centric. And I think that's a great attitude to have in Latin America, because it's a region that historically, has been conquered and colonized and exploited. So having the mindset of, hey, we're here to learn from you, and we're here to create a win-win situation for everybody. It's just a very, very helpful and promising attitude to have in general. So I would say it applies to all the countries.
Okay, very well. Thanks, Christian, for that. We have another questions also sent by our participants. This is from Erasmus Shukunda. He's from Nigeria Port Harcourt Chamber of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture. His question is, how will agribusinesses in Nigeria source for contacts to export their products in Latin America? Do you have any advice for that, Daniel or Christian?
Yeah, I think for sure I am available to talk more about it in LinkedIn. And I think a positive side of what is happening with this whole pandemic situation is that we have more digital events also. So I can share some of the events which are happening here in Brazil, and it is a good opportunity to connect and create a network. And also I would say, especially here in Brazil, the cooperatives, they are a very good contact to start, because they have a very strong network of farmers, and they know what kind of solutions they are looking for. So it could be a good way to start to connect.
Very well, thank you. We have another questions. Okay, this is Mr. Rory. Follow-up questions. Okay, this is addressed to both Christian and Daniel. How widespread is online work in the agri-tech community? So he says that they have set a number of trade missions for the next 2 years as part of the cluster initiatives, which aim to develop business in agriculture and satellite-derived data. Obviously, these plans will be followed up further, but then how easy or difficult it is to build relationship online if, after this pandemic situation in Latin America, especially.
I think it is definitely possible. So even before the pandemic, what we learned conducting these interviews all over Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, and also we, as Bosch, we have some experience in Chile and Colombia, is that the farmers are really connected. So everybody has a cell phone. They are using social media, as I mentioned, for example, LinkedIn, and they are used to do it because they are normally apart from the main towns, like São Paulo here in Brazil, for example, or the capitals in different countries, but their business are depending on this kind of connections. So they are already used to do it virtually. And for sure, the pandemic is speeding up this process a little bit. And something important, I mentioned that we don't have connection in a large area, but normally they don't have in the field. But when they come back home, for sure they have connectivity, and they are using internet all the time. So it's definitely possible.
Okay. And what do you think, Christian, with what is the difference, especially maybe in the cultural sense? Are there any extreme difference in Latin America in this regard with this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about I don't have the statistics on technology penetration, but from a cultural perspective, what I would say is conducting more of your business and conversations online through whatever device it might be. I think it puts a little extra pressure on allowing enough time to build a relationship and build that personal connection, right? So you know, when you get on the phone, or if you're on a Zoom call, or when you're in online meetings, just try to allow a little bit of time to just have some informal chit chat, right? And because that's you know, it's not a perfect replacement for a handshake or a hug or a kiss, as is very common in many countries. But at least you're showing a willingness to know people as people and not just as professional partners. So yeah, I would just keep that in mind. I think it's important.
Nice. Maybe I can also add what we experience in the physical situation. Normally, when we go to a farm, for example, we travel more than 1,000 kilometers to get there, and it's not easy to get there. But the farmers are very welcoming here. So normally they are very proud of what they are doing there, and they want you to feel really welcome. So they invite us to eat some cake. Normally they introduce their family, so it is really something warm. And I agree with Christian. I would say it's impossible to fully replace this physical interaction, but there are some ways to at least do some of it in a virtual session. And for sure, I would recommend that. It's very important from our side.
Yeah, do the virtual cake, a virtual cake, or a
Yeah.
virtual cafezinho.
Or a coffee.
Right.
Yeah. That would be very nice. All right. Okay. So I think that's all. Yes, we've covered all the questions addressed to both of you, and also we are pretty much in time with the time as well. I thank you very much for all participants for the questions, and also it has been very useful and insightful information for all of us. And I would like to remind again that this recording, the presentation, will be made available in Cubin website, and we will also send on your email. And just a small reminder, after this finish, there will be a short survey of this webinar. We would very much appreciate if you could take a few minutes to fill out the survey. And then, yes, any final remarks from both of you, Daniel and Christian, before we finish?
From my side, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I invite everybody to keep in touch through LinkedIn. So if you have additional questions and want to learn more, please follow the Curitiba Connectory, which is our hub for open innovation here in Latin America, and also myself. I would be very, very happy to talk to you.
Christian?
Yeah, just I'm very appreciative of SPI and ENRICH and Cubin for putting this together and having me. I'm sorry there was a technological glitch at the beginning, but hopefully the conversation made up for that. So yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Very well. Thank you so much both. Really appreciate as well for your time and the information for us. And I think with this, I would like to close our webinar today. Thank you again for all the attention. And then I wish to hope you all in the next webinar. Please keep in touch and follow our social media channel as well. Thank you, and wishing you a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.